3 weeks ago, I turned 27 years old. I know that's not the kind of birthday that gets a big fuss, no sweet 16, no champagne at 21. But it was still my birthday, and I still thought, naively, that my own family might actually show up for me this time. I was wrong. And honestly, what happened next changed everything. Let me back up. I grew up in a house where the rules were simple. My older brother could do no wrong, and I could do nothing right. He's 31 now, married to a woman my parents adore, and he has always been the son that the rest of our family orbits around. My parents never tried to hide it. When my brother graduated college, they threw a party that took 3 months to plan. When I graduated, my mother said she was too exhausted from helping plan his wedding to do anything big. I said okay. I always said okay. I've been saying okay my entire life. For the past 2 years, I've been living in a studio apartment 40 minutes from my parents' house. I moved out partly for work, partly because I finally admitted to myself that going home felt less like comfort and less like coming back to something and more like shrinking. Every visit, I'd leave feeling smaller than when I arrived. But I kept going back, because that's what you do. That's what I told myself anyway. About a month before my birthday, my mother called me, which was unusual because she typically lets my brother relay information as though he's some kind of family spokesperson. She sounded warm and excited, also unusual, and she told me that she and my father had been planning something special. My dad's college roommate owns a lake house up in the Smoky Mountains, she said. He'd offered it to the family for a long weekend in late April. She said they wanted to make it a birthday trip for me. She said, "We want to do something nice for you this year." I remember sitting in my car in a parking lot after that call, just staring at nothing, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Like maybe I had been wrong about them. Like maybe they were trying. I took a week of PTO. I bought new hiking boots. I texted my best friend Rachel and told her the family was finally coming around, and she said she'd believe it when she saw it, but she was happy for me. I packed my bag 2 days early like an idiot. The Thursday before we were supposed to leave, my brother called. He didn't even open with hello. He just started talking, the way he always does. Like whatever he has to say is so important that pleasantries are a waste of everyone's time. He told me that his wife had just found out she was pregnant, which, yes, I'm happy for them. I genuinely am. And that they had decided to share the news with the family at the lake house that weekend. He said it with this energy, this particular tone he uses when he's decided something, and he's informing you of it rather than discussing it. Then he told me that he and his wife needed the master bedroom because she was in her first trimester and needed space to rest. The master bedroom. The one my parents had told me was mine for the trip since it was my birthday weekend. I told him congratulations and that I was sure we could figure out the sleeping arrangements. He said, "Actually, there's kind of another thing." And that's when I knew. He told me that his wife's parents were also coming. Apparently they had been invited at some point in the last week without anyone telling me. The lake house has 3 bedrooms, the master for him and his wife. One for my parents, one for her parents. And then he said, very casually, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world, that there was a pull-out couch in the living room, but that his mother-in-law has back problems, so that wasn't really an option for her. He then said that he and his wife had talked it over, and they felt like since it was a big announcement weekend, and since his in-laws were coming a long way, it might actually make more sense for me to just celebrate my birthday separately. He said my parents agreed. He said, "You understand, right?" I said nothing for a long moment. Then I asked if I could speak to our parents directly. He said they were at dinner with his in-laws, which was how I found out that his in-laws were apparently already in town, already integrated into the plans, already more considered than I had been. I told him I'd call them later. He said, "Don't make this a whole thing," and he hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while after that. I'm not going to dress it up. I cried the kind of crying where you're not even fully sure what you're crying about, whether it's the specific thing that just happened or everything the specific thing represents. Every birthday forgotten or minimized. Every holiday where I sat at the table and watched my parents light up for my brother in a way they never quite managed for me. Every time I convinced myself it wasn't that bad, I was being too sensitive. Families are complicated. All of it came up at once. Then the crying stopped, and something else started. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she'd been expecting my call, which meant she'd known this conversation was coming and had still let my brother make it for her. She started with, "Sweetheart, we just thought since the timing with the baby news," and I stopped her. I asked her directly, Did she know when she called me a month ago and invited me that this weekend was going to be restructured around my brother's announcement? She paused too long. That pause was my answer. She had invited me knowing there was a real chance I'd get bumped. Or worse, she'd invited me genuinely and then let my brother rearrange everything the moment it served him without a single thought about what that meant for me. Either way, she chose not to call me herself. She let him do it. She sat at dinner with his in-laws while I was learning, from him, that I was no longer wanted at my own birthday trip. I told her I understood. I told her I hoped they had a wonderful time. I told her I'd be fine. I was not planning to be fine. Here's the thing about being the overlooked child in a family for 27 years. You learn to be resourceful. You stop expecting people to hand you things and you start figuring out how to build them yourself. I'm good at my job. I have friends who actually love me. And I have, over the years, developed a very specific skill set for handling disappointment. That skill set includes knowing when to let something go and when to finally do something about it. This was a do something about it moment. The first thing I did was call Rachel. I told her everything and she was furious in the way only a best friend can be. The kind of furious that feels like being wrapped in a warm blanket. She said, "What do you want to do?" I told her I wasn't totally sure yet, but that I needed her help. She said, "Name it." The second thing I did was think about what my parents actually cared about. Not me, clearly, or at least not enough. But they cared deeply about how they appeared to other people. My father is a semi-retired financial consultant who still does work for a handful of long-term clients and sits on the board of a local community foundation. My mother volunteers with 2 different nonprofits and has a social circle she tends like a garden. They care enormously about their reputation as good, solid, decent people, warm parents, a loving family. I had, sitting in my phone, an invitation to a rooftop birthday dinner that Rachel had been quietly planning for me for the past 2 weeks. She had already reserved the space. She had already invited a dozen of our friends. And she had also, it turned out when I called her back, already drafted a group photo caption for social media that she'd planned to post afterward. I told her to add my parents' work colleagues to the guest list. Not all of them. I wasn't trying to burn the world down. Just my father's 2 closest professional contacts, the ones who came to the house for dinner twice a year, who sent Christmas cards, who knew my name and asked about my life, and my mother's closest friend from the nonprofit board, who had known me since I was 12 and who had, at various holiday parties over the years, expressed what I could tell was genuine concern about the way my family dynamics worked. Rachel looked them up. 2 had public contact information. 1 was an easy find through the nonprofit's website. She drafted warm, personal invitations from me. A small birthday gathering, rooftop venue, downtown, Saturday evening. Casual. Celebratory. I signed each one and she sent them. All 3 said yes. The night of my birthday, I got dressed in a way that felt like armor. I did my makeup carefully. I wore the green dress that Rachel says makes me look like I've just returned from winning something. I went to that rooftop and I celebrated my birthday with the people who actually showed up for me. The food was good. The wine was good. The skyline was beautiful. I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in days. Midway through the evening, with everyone gathered and comfortable and in good spirits, I stood up to say a few words. I thanked Rachel. I thanked everyone for coming. And then I said something like this. I told them that I had almost spent tonight alone, because the birthday trip my parents planned for me had been quietly handed over to my brother's family without anyone bothering to tell me directly. I said I had learned about it from my brother in a phone call, after my parents had already let it happen. I said I wasn't telling them this for pity. I was telling them because I'd spent too many years protecting a version of my family that didn't quite match reality, and I was done doing that. I said I wanted the people in my life, every person at that table, to know the real version. My father's colleague, a man I've known since I was a teenager, set down his glass and looked at me for a long moment. My mother's friend from the nonprofit put her hand over mine. I took a photo with everyone. Then, when the evening wound down and people started hugging goodbye, I pulled out my phone and sent the photo to my parents. The caption was simple. Had a beautiful birthday dinner with some wonderful people. Thank you all for showing up for me. I didn't tag them. I didn't have to. My mother called within the hour. I let it go to voicemail. My father called 20 minutes later. Voicemail. My brother called and I watched the screen light up and go dark and felt something release in my chest that I hadn't realized I was holding. The next morning, I had a voicemail from my mother that I only listened to once. She said she couldn't believe I had involved people from their professional lives. She said I had embarrassed the family. She said my father's colleague had called him that same night, asking questions she described as deeply inappropriate. She did not once say she was sorry. She did not once acknowledge that any of what had happened to me was wrong. 2 days later, I got an email from my father. It was long. He talked about how they had made the decision with the best intentions, how the pregnancy changed things, how they hadn't meant to hurt me. He wrote 3 paragraphs about how damaging it had been to involve outside people in a private family matter. In the very last paragraph, he wrote that he hoped I knew they loved me and that this could all be put behind us if I was willing to have an honest conversation. I read it twice. Then I closed it. Here's what I noticed. Not once in that email did my father apologize for letting my brother call me with news that should have come from them. Not once did he acknowledge that they had been at dinner with his in-laws laughing and celebrating the pregnancy while I was being told, by my brother, that I wasn't needed at my own birthday trip. Not once did he admit that this was part of a pattern that had been going on for my entire life. He wanted to put it behind us. He didn't want to look at it. I did not respond to the email. What I did do was call Rachel and tell her I was ready to have a different kind of conversation with myself, about what I actually wanted my life to look like. I had been circling this for years. The half-holidays. The phone calls I made more than received. The quiet, practiced art of making myself smaller so that the family dynamic could stay comfortable for everyone else. I had been so focused on being the daughter who didn't make trouble that I had made no space at all for being a person who deserved more. The following week, 2 things happened. The first was that my mother's friend from the nonprofit, the woman who'd known me since I was 12, reached out to me privately. She said she had been thinking about what I shared at dinner. She said it took courage to say what I said. She also said gently, carefully, as someone who genuinely cared, that what I described had worried her, and that she wanted me to know I wasn't alone. We met for coffee that week and talked for 2 hours. I left that conversation feeling like someone had opened a window in a room I'd been living in for years, without realizing how little air was getting in. The second thing that happened was my brother called again. This time he was not casual. He was angry. He said I had poisoned the family with my performance at my birthday dinner. He said his mother-in-law had made a comment to his wife about our family dynamics, and now his wife was upset and asking questions he didn't want to answer. He said I had deliberately sabotaged what should have been a happy time for them. He said I needed to apologize. I listened to all of it. I let him finish. And then I said something I had never said to him in my life. I said that I was not going to apologize. I said that I understood he was angry, but that I had spent years watching our parents organize their care and attention around him, and that when they let him take away the one birthday plan they'd ever made for me, without even calling me themselves, I had finally had enough. I told him I didn't blame his wife. I didn't even fully blame him. I blamed a pattern that everyone in our family had let continue because it was easier than honesty. I told him I loved him, because I do, even now, even through all of it, but that I was not willing to keep pretending. He hung up. My parents didn't reach out again for about a week and a half. Then my mother called on a Sunday morning and, for the first time in any of this, she cried. Not performative crying, real, quiet, uncertain crying. She said she didn't know I had felt this way for so long. She said she and my father had talked and they wanted to do better. She said she was sorry for the birthday trip. She said she was sorry for letting my brother make that call. I sat with that for a long time before responding. I told her I appreciated it. I told her I needed it to be more than one phone call, that I needed to actually see them choose differently, more than once, over time. She said she understood. I don't know exactly what happens next. We're not fixed. My brother and I haven't spoken since that phone call. My parents and I have had 2 careful, slightly awkward dinners that were nothing like normal but were also nothing like before. My father's colleague sent him a message, I'm told, that was pointed enough to prompt a real conversation. My mother stepped back from one of her nonprofit committees temporarily, I think partly because she was embarrassed and partly because she finally needed to sit with something instead of organizing her way around it. And me? I went back to that rooftop last weekend. Just me and Rachel and 2 other friends who have loved me without conditions for years. We ordered way too much food and stayed until the staff started stacking chairs around us. I told them about everything, all of it, and they listened the way good people listen, which is fully and without needing to fix anything. I turned 27 in a room where nobody left me out. That's the birthday I'm going to remember. If you've ever been the one your family forgot to consider the one who always made room and was never made room for. I want you to know that the story doesn't have to stay that way. The hardest part isn't the confrontation. The hardest part is believing, deep down, that you were worth showing up for all along. Because you were. You always were. Some families just take longer to figure that out. And some of us have to show them the cost of getting it wrong before they're finally willing to learn.